So it has been some time since I read a book that required me to just walk around confused and upset for a little while. This book definitely did that. Today we're discussing If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, so grab yourselves a cuppa and a copy and let's get into it. Here's the thing. I know I said that we wouldn't be reading contemporary novels, but I read 3 books in a row that I didn't really love, and when that happens, I start to get a little upset. It puts me into a reading rut, and I just get kind of bummed out. And so I wanted to pick something up that I was hoping would inspire me. I kind of convinced myself that it was okay to pick up this book because it is a dark academia book. And so I convinced myself that it was okay. Basically, the summary of this story is, as you can see, I really enjoyed it. I don't typically annotate books for fun, but this was so good that I just had to put some little things in. If We Were Villains tells the story of a group of friends at an elite art school. It's an elite art college in Illinois. I don't know if it really exists. I don't know if the castle that they're in really exists, but I would like to Google it. I think the city does really exist. But they are thespians at this art school, and it's so elite that they literally only do Shakespeare, which I find hilarious. And the whole book, the premise of the book is that a murder happens at the school, and these friends are kind of navigating that situation. Our story opens up with our main character, Oliver, on his release from jail. He's the one that has been in jail for the murder. But was it him? Was it not? Who knows? It was really good. There were several things I loved about this story, and I would say that the number one thing that had me on this author's train was that it was set up like a Shakespeare tragedy, both in its content, but also in its format. So let me find you a thing here. There are 5 acts in the book, and that's kind of like the section, almost like chapters, and then there's scenes, which are like the subsections or subchapters in the book. And I died for that formatting. And then also in some places, the way the dialogue was set up is that they would have like the person's name, and then it would have the quote, like it's like you're really reading it from Shakespeare, like from the play itself, which I just thought was so much fun. So it's a 5-act story, and it totally followed the pattern of a Shakespearean tragedy, which I also found wonderful. And oh, I forgot to mention that this was one of the Dark Academia Book Club books, so I will put their discussion in the description box. I think it was on Emmy's channel that they did this book. Anyway, back to the point. I'm a little scatterbrained right now. But it followed the 5-act structure of a Shakespeare play, and the 4th act was the most boring, to be totally honest with you, but I find that to be the case very often in Shakespeare plays. I think it was in the 3rd act that the death is discovered, and it was just so good. It was so good. I loved that they did that. M.L. Rio structured it this way. Some of the plays that they do they talk about nearly all of them, and the sonnets, but they do Julius Caesar, which is really convenient because I just read Julius Caesar. They do Romeo and Juliet, obviously. They did, what was their first semester one? I don't remember now. I just finished this book like less than a week ago. Anyway, they do a bunch of Shakespeare plays, including but not limited to Julius Caesar, which I found great. Julius Caesar was their first semester play. What did they do second semester? Was it Macbeth? I think Macbeth was their second semester play. And yeah. Anyway, let's talk about the characters. So our main character is Oliver, and he was very relatable to me. He was very confused about things. He was kind of just unaware. He was perfectly average in every way, exactly what you want a main character to be. And so he was just, all of his friends have all of these things going on, and he doesn't really know what's going on. His roommate is James, and James is super sweet and is a tortured little soul. but he's absolutely darling. And then Alexander is a problem. He's kind of a drug addict. He's kind of a screw up, to be honest with you. And then Richard is kind of like the cool guy in the group. One of the things about the guys that I found so enjoyable was how the author describes this power struggle that happened. So at the beginning of the story, we see that Richard is kind of like the alpha male. And then the cast list comes out, and, well, let's go through all of them. Richard is the alpha male. James is the beta male. Oliver is the gamma male, and Alexander doesn't care about where he is in the group. So that's kind of like the hierarchy of males. And one of the cool things that the author did was, like, there was a cast list that came out, and then suddenly, and we hear from Oliver's point of view how there was, like, this shift in the group. Like, the power dynamics were off. Something was going on. And how that was sort of like the catalyst for the rest of the story, this cast list that came out, because they're in their 4th year, which means they're graduating. Everybody wants to expand a little bit to increase their resume, to improve their resumes. And so, yeah, this power shift happens. And with that came all of the drama. So the alpha male starts to get kind of upset that the beta male is pushing up on him. And later on, we're going to see how the gamma male kind of manhandles the beta male. And that was so much fun to watch. I actually really enjoyed that aspect of the story, kind of the hierarchy, because I think that males, human males, men, if you will, they do a better job of, like, organizing themselves in a hierarchical structure than women do, just based on observation. I mean, you can see this in like sports teams and stuff. There's, like, a deference to the captain of the team, and you see that, like, from Pee-wee football all the way up to, like, pro leagues. And so it was fun to see how kind of those structures, how that structure changes over the course of this story. And I know that, I think it was Mary who said that she didn't, in the Dark Academics book club, she said that she found it to be not very believable. I have seen those sort of power structure shifts. They don't result in murders, but I have seen those power structure shifts happen in male groups, and they do kind of behave that way. It's very interesting to see. We also have a group of girls that are best friends with them. The first one is Meredith, and she is Richard's girlfriend, and they have issues. The second one is Pip, or Philippa. I love that name. I didn't know I loved that name until reading this book, but she seems to be like the mother of the group, and she just wants everybody to be safe and happy and healthy. And so I found her to be a very relatable character, because that's totally me. I am definitely the mother of whatever group I'm in. I will be making drunk people sandwiches, and that's just totally my way. And then the last one is Ren, and Ren is Richard's cousin. So that is the story. The reason that I think some people don't like this book, from what I remember of the Dark Academics book club discussion, was that it's too unbelievable. So they don't know it's a murder at first. They think it's just a death, and they decide that they just aren't going to do anything about it. And the question is that realistic? And I think it is. I watched a documentary series about William Shakespeare, and when they were discussing, I think it was Romeo, it was a PBS special, it was amazing. I got it at my local library, so support your local libraries. But when they were talking about Romeo and Juliet, they were talking about these stories from the news where young people do murder-suicides or whatever, or double suicides, being inspired by the story of Romeo and Juliet. And I feel like it's not, like, completely outlandish to hear of people who do things because they've seen it done in movies, TV shows, video games, whatever. I went to a mental health talk with my local congressman, and he was talking about how they had to arrest this 8-year-old for gun violence. He got involved in a gang, and he shot somebody. That's often the initiation process for gangs, is to kill somebody. And when the police arrived, this 8-year-old was just standing over the man's dead body, and they asked him, like, what happened? What's going on? And he goes, well, I thought he would just get up, because he plays video games, and when in video games, if you shoot somebody, they just get back up. Now, I know that's an 8-year-old, and these people are 21 or 22, but I think psychologically, when you are subjected to that sort of content, it becomes normal. Shakespeare is tragic, and Shakespeare plays have tragic deaths, and these violent lights have violent ends. And so I think it's representative of something that could actually happen for people who aren't careful. And the thing is, they are so immersed. I keep looking at my Shakespeare shelf. They are so immersed in Shakespeare. They aren't watching movies and they aren't watching TV shows. They aren't reading any other books except for Shakespeare books or like peripheral Shakespeare books about the time of Shakespeare or about the time that he's writing about. And so they are completely drowning in Shakespeare, basically. And I hope I marked this spot. There was one point where Oliver is talking to the detective about kind of how Shakespeare had an impact on their lives. And he says something along the lines of, do you think Shakespeare had anything to do with this situation? And he said, I think Shakespeare has everything to do with it. This was a good line. Our sheer capacity for feeling got to be so unwieldy that we staggered under it like Atlas with the weight of the world. Here it is. Do you blame Shakespeare for any of it? The question is so unlikely, so nonsensical, coming from such a sensible man, that I can't suppress a smile. I blame him for all of it, I say. He mimics my smile, though his is tentative, unsure of where the humor really is. Why is that? It's hard to put into words. I pause, waste a minute trying to collect my thoughts, then proceed without having collected anything at all. We spent 4 years, and most of us, years before that, immersed in Shakespeare. Submerged. Here we could indulge our collective obsession. We spoke it as a second language, conversed in poetry, and lost touch with reality. A little. I reconsider, well, that's misleading. Shakespeare's real, but his characters live in a world of real extremes. They swing from ecstasy to anguish, love to hate, wonder to terror. It's not melodrama, though they're not exaggerating. Every moment is crucial. I glance sideways at him, unsure if I'm making any sense. He's still wearing that uncertain half smile, but he nods, so I continue. A good Shakespearean actor, a good actor of any stripe, really, doesn't just say words, he feels them. We felt all the passions of the characters we played as if they were our own. But a character's emotions don't cancel out the actors. Instead, you feel both at once. Imagine having all your thoughts and feelings tangled up with all the thoughts and feelings of a whole other person. It can be hard sometimes to sort out which is which. I slow down, come to a stop, frustrated by my own inability to express myself. A frustration exasperated by the fact that after 10 years, I still think of myself as an actor. Colburn watches me with keen, curious eyes. I wet my lips with my tongue and proceed more carefully. Our sheer capacity for feeling got to be so unwieldy that we staggered under it like Atlas with the weight of the world. I sigh, and the freshness of the air derails me. How long will it take, I wonder, for me to get used to it again? My chest aches, and maybe it's the unfamiliar purity of the air, but maybe not. The thing about Shakespeare is, he's so eloquent. He speaks the unspeakable. He turns grief and triumph and rapture into rage, into words, into something we can understand. He renders the whole mystery of humanity comprehensible. I stop, shrug. You can justify anything if you do it poetically enough. Damn. You hear my mom? She ruined my monologue. Okay, hopefully she's far enough away that she can't hear her anymore. So I loved this book, absolutely loved it. I do want to talk spoilers, but I wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of time time to not hear them if you didn't want them. A few things that I absolutely loved is at one point Oliver is packing to leave, and all he does, it seems, is throw scarves and socks into a suitcase. And anyone who knows me knows that, like, if there's two things Alexi needs, it's scarves and socks, to the point that I often get those things for holidays, Christmas and stuff, because those are really the only two things that I need. And also to the point that when I go babysit for certain kids who I don't see all the time, they have specific socks in their heads that they expect me to be wearing because I have so many socks. Anyway, I thought that was lovely. Another thing I thought was lovely was Frederick, who is one of their drama teachers. He has them drink out of teacups, and he says, let me see, 4th year, the year of tragedy, Frederick gradually drinking tea from mugs, we are often reminded, was like drinking fine wine from a solo cup. I just thought that was so funny, and so I really need to step my game up with my teacups. My mom actually has a collection of teacups that I absolutely love, but I don't use them because I feel like they're so proper, and I only use them when I have like proper tea parties. Another thing that isn't really super it's plot relevant, but it's not spoilery, is that they talk about how Julius Caesar is actually a tragedy. Now, I just read Julius Caesar, and it will probably be up somewhere, so you guys can check that out. But I called it a history play. And they explained how all of the history plays they take place throughout English history, and Julius Caesar is obviously Roman history. So I thought that was really interesting. It taught me something. I'm really glad I read Julius Caesar before this. I kind of wish I had read several of the plays before this, most important Pericles. So I picked up Pericles, and we'll be reading it soon. Please subscribe if you'd like to see my assessment of Pericles and how it is totally relevant to If We Were Villains. Oh, this was a good line. If you haven't made any enemies in life, you've been living too safely. I feel like I heard J.K. Rowling say something like that too. This was so poignant. I'm glad I marked it. I didn't even realize what was going to happen at this point. Camilo, who was their, like, dance instructor, he's not. He's, like, the choreographer, the fight choreographer. There's a brighter name for that, but I can't think of it. He says, it's remarkable how the theater and Shakespeare in particular can numb us to the spectacle of violence. But it's not just a trick. When Macbeth has his head chopped off, or Lavinia her tongue cut out, or the conspirators bathe their hands in Caesar's blood, it should affect you, whether you're the victim, the aggressor, or only a bystander. Have you ever seen a real fight? It's ugly, it's visceral. Most importantly, it's emotional. Oh! Absolutely loved this book. Honestly, like, I had to shower and go to bed after reading this. I finished it at like 9:30 at night, and I walked around to every person in my household. Up. I don't even know how we feel about what's happening right now. And then I had to shower and go to sleep because that's all I could do. Actors by nature are volatile, alchemic creatures composed of incendiary elements, emotion and ego and envy. Heat them up, stir them together, and sometimes you get gold. Sometimes disaster. I think one of the reasons I loved this book so much is that I did hang out with a lot of theater kids when I was in high school, and so many of the things that it seemed like they were going through, not so much the murder, but a lot of the things they were going through seemed like things that, like, I could see my high school friends going through, kind of like the emotions and working together and how all of that fit together. I wonder where they are now. I hope some of them are still on the stage because they were absolutely talented. And I also spent most of this book thinking about whatever the London School of Drama is, where, like, Tom Hiddleston trained and Benedict Cumberbatch trained, and I just imagined, like, some of my favorite actors being different characters in the story, and that was really, really fun to have that little experiment of the thought going on. Oliver's talking to Colburn, who is the man who put him in jail, and he was saying something about Shakespeare. He quoted Shakespeare. This is the other thing. They knew Shakespeare so well, they could speak Shakespeare exclusive to each other while entirely intoxicated. Can you imagine having that level of knowledge of William Shakespeare, that you could do an entire scene of it completely plastered drunk? That happens, which is great. I thought they would have beaten that BS out of you in prison, in reference to Oliver speaking Shakespeare to him. That BS is all that kept me going. One thing I'm sure Colburn will never understand is that I need language to live like food. Lexmus and morphines and I said morphemes, and morsels of meaning nourished me with the knowledge that yes, there is a word for this. Someone else has felt it before. I really loved the writing of this book. To be totally honest with you, I loved it. I'm just starting to read sections to you. So I cannot recommend this book enough. It does have a couple of trigger warnings. Drug abuse, eating disorders, murder. It wasn't a super bloody description, but like it was there. So I love the book. Would highly recommend it to anyone who has any affection for William Shakespeare whatsoever. You guys know Shakespeare holds a special place in my heart, and so I found this book to be amazing. I got it from my local library, in case you can't tell because it's all covered. This is a book that I will be buying new because it was that good that I want it on my shelf as a new book. And since I have you here, I just want to explain about how important I think it is to check out books from the library, read them, and then buy them if you like them, because otherwise you get to be like these booktubers who have like 1 million books on their shelves and they've spent zillions of dollars on those books that aren't even books that they're sure they're gonna like. And so you have to constantly be doing unhauls and all these things, and like it's fine, it makes for great content on YouTube, but I don't think it translates to reality at all. So all of the books on my bookshelves are either classic books if I haven't read them, nonfiction books if I've read bits of them, or fiction books that I have read, like modern fiction books that I have read. Because I just think, except for one of them, well, there are a couple. I may have purchased a series and I've only read part of the series, but I knew I liked the series before I bought it. The last book or whatever. Does that make sense? It doesn't matter. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point in the future. Anyway, I hope you guys pick up If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Oh, I didn't even give you my breakdown. Hold on. I'm trying to get out of here because I have an appointment at the library. It sucks I have to make appointments for the library. I would really love to just go and walk around. Okay, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. For the quality of writing, I gave a 5. As you could tell, I marked a lot of it because there were so many bits that I just thought were so poignant, so real life, that I just had to, they just spoke truisms to my heart, and I had to mark them. For ease of reading, I gave a 5. It wasn't like a super challenge. It wasn't Shakespeare himself. Only the Shakespeare bits were Shakespeare, and those were tough, but it's Shakespeare, so you'd expect it. The pacing, I gave a 4. Like I said, Act 4, there was kind of like a little bit of a lull, but I expect that from basically everything that I read. The plot development, I gave a 3. There were a couple of holes that I was kind of like unsure of. One of the things that almost bothered me was that Ren was there, but she didn't seem to do much. She was just sort of a waif in the wind. And oh, that's for character. Hold on. Let's dial it back. For plot development, I gave it a 3 because there were a few times where it seemed like the author was trying to throw you off track. You kind of know who the person is. Like throughout this story, so my first instinct was right. I don't want to give it away. My first instinct was correct on who did what. And there were several times throughout the story where, like, the author tried to pretend to throw you off track, to say, well, maybe it was this person, well, maybe it was that person. And there were really only, like, 3 people it could have been. And throughout this story, like, when you get hints of those 3 things, like, it's fine. But then, sorry, there are a few things that it's like, this is so obviously not the case. So, for example, the policeman thinks that it's one person, that, like, it's not even possible that it could have been that person, and it's like, well, you're just throwing that in there because you want us to be, you know, thrown off the scent of the trail, and it didn't work. I would have preferred if she had stuck with the 3 most likely candidates to have committed the murder. 3 is characters. I gave characters a 3 also, and that is because there were a few characters that seemed not totally fleshed out or kind of unimportant. Now, like I said, I really loved Pip, but she didn't do a whole lot in the story. She was the mother figure in the story where she was just wanting to protect everybody, but it's not like she had a huge role to play. And then Ren really was just like a waif in the wind. She didn't do much at all. So these couple of characters I didn't love. They seemed to just be there as filler for the group. Next was atmosphere. I gave a 5. It takes place at a school. Their dorm is a castle in the woods next to a black lake. I mean, the atmosphere could not have been more perfect, and I want to go here, like, for a vacation, assuming that somebody hasn't been murdered there. For enjoyability, I gave it a 4. As I said, I walked around confused and upset after finishing it. Insightfulness, I also gave a 4. Like I said, some people, I think it was Mary Among Stories and Crescent Pages, both said that they found this story to be a little bit unrealistic. I don't find it unrealistic. I think that there's a lot to be said about, like, how we consume content and how that content can cause us to go out and make choices that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. And how people who are immersed in William Shakespeare could totally do this. I have no doubt. Logic, I gave a 4. As I said, there were just a couple of holes. And then the book cover, I gave a 3. Maybe a 4. There's a couple book covers. This is not the book cover that the Dark Academics had. I actually like this one maybe better. I don't know. Is the skull from Hamlet? Isn't the skull in Hamlet? I don't think they did Hamlet. They did Julius Caesar, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and something else, but I don't think it was Hamlet. So I kind of don't like that. So yes. So all in all, I gave it a 4. I will put the Dark Academics book club down below so you guys can check out their channels and their discussion on the book. I really loved it. I am so glad that they were the reasons that I found this book, and so I'm really glad that they are doing that book discussion because picked up a new favorite book of mine. This is definitely probably in the top 5 best books that I've read this year. Very excited. So please do pick up this book from your local library, read it, and if you feel the need to annotate it, do that too. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. P.S. Read Pericles before you read it. I am reading Pericles after, so I have to figure out what happens at the end of this book by reading Pericles. Ugh.